hits all the time.
We are family.
Outstanding effort again.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
That's big time.
Minus 15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We are up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Andy Claff, coming at you an hour early here today, which is ironic considering the fact that the Orioles are out on the West Coast with a 10-10 start. But we just felt like getting up early today, I guess, and drinking our coffee.
Yeah, I brought my coffee on the pod today.
That's big for you.
This is like the 5th caffeinated beverage I've had in 2024. I tried quitting it since then, and I'm back on the wagon.
I think that's the story of most people that try to stop drinking coffee, is that you
I
quit
did
for
a
about...
pretty good job.
How long did you quit for?
Since New Year's.
That's impressive.
That was pretty impressive.
That is impressive. But now you're back on the grind.
I'm back. And I'm going to need a cup tonight working the social shift.
Yeah. Hope you
That's
have lots of coffee
bedtime.
ready.
The starting pitch is my bedtime, so.
10-10 is, that's a late start time. But if you were up last night, you saw a good Orioles win against the Dodgers. It was a Brandon Hyde masterclass with the bullpen. What else is new? Brandon Hyde just doing that. It was a Ramon Urias masterclass as well with a home run.
Love to
sure we'll
see
take
it.
our Ramon Urias victory lap at some point on this podcast,
The
as
Ramon
we do
reminder,
every week.
I'm trademarking that.
The Ramon reminder?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll trademark that at some point during this show. No softball update this week, unfortunately.
Oh.
Got rained out because it rained for about 20 minutes, and then they kind of jumped the gun on calling it. I'm not going to lie, but
Well, I lucked out because it saved me an hour and a half drive from.
You weren't going to be at softball either way.
My abode in Northern Virginia.
You were not going to come to softball either way. I think that was apparent going into the week.
Well,
rain or shine.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure about that. Andy, today we got a lot to talk about with the Orioles offense, but it wouldn't be an episode of The Bird's Nest if we didn't have to start with an injury update. But the good news for this week is that there are both good injury updates and bad injury updates. So would you like to start with the good news or like to start with the bad news?
Let's start with the good news.
Let's start with the good news.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've had some good injury updates.
Yeah.
Especially with the rotation. So let's start off with that.
All right, we have a few good injury updates here. Starting in the lineup last night, Cedric Mullins was back. Mm-hmm. Yay, that's good. Jacob Webb. Brandon Hyde says he's going to Norfolk for a rehab assignment. Yay. And then finally, Zach Eflin, skipping a rehab assignment. He'll be back in the rotation after his 15-day IL stint is up. He is eligible to return on Sunday against the Rockies, so we will hopefully see Zach Eflin start then. Yay.
Yeah, that one will be huge. Like I said, it is kind of the first good news we've had with the rotation injury-wise since probably the Kyle Bradish
ever?
injury.
I think since probably ever this season.
So that is definitely huge if everything goes according to plan. It'll be great to have him back, especially kind of easing him in a little bit. The Rockies series is a good series to have him back for the first one in 15 days. So
yeah.
That'll be a nice one to ease in if he does make the start there. You do have the starting rotation right now. Different than what was planned, not only from the beginning of the season, but also since the trade deadline. You have Trevor Rogers in Norfolk right now, Albert Suarez in the starting rotation still. So definitely different, but to have Zach Eflin back in there will be huge.
Yeah, getting Zach Eflin back is massive because as we talked about over the last few weeks, when you were looking at a Zach Eflin injury, a Grayson Rodriguez injury, the hope was that they would be back in September because, yes, you are trying to win the AL East. These games in late August are all important. They are not as important as the games in late September and hopefully games that you will be playing in early October. So getting Eflin and Grayson back for that stretch was the most important thing. And as soon as you hear, any sort of shoulder or elbow injury for a starting pitcher, you get worried that it's going to be a longer-term thing. We haven't had many updates on Grayson Rodriguez, but to get positive updates back on Zach Eflin, where he doesn't even need a rehab assignment. This is what Grayson Rodriguez did the first time around when he got injured. Didn't need a rehab assignment, just popped back into the rotation after the 2 weeks. It was clear that the 15-day injured list stint for Zach Eflin was a precaution. He said a few days after the injury that he was feeling a lot better. So to get Eflin back immediately after, without just a rehab, without even any rehab stint, to get him back immediately after his 15 days are up is huge. And it makes the starting rotation feel a lot different when it's not just Corbin Burns at the start that you feel really confident in every fifth day. It's Zach Eflin as a very, very solid number 2.
Yeah, and it's good on both Eflin and Rodriguez for how they kind of handled it, kind of jumping the gun a little bit before it gets too bad to be able to actually come back from it. So Grayson Rodriguez was definitely, rightly so, premature on letting the staff and coaching aware of his kind of discomfort and pain. So they got a head start on repairing that and recovering, and then same with Eflin. So good on them for both making the mature decisions and getting a head start on it so that they can be back by September, middle of September, and even early September, which will be great to have Eflin back. And you're right, you do feel great about Corbin Burns. He's had a few iffy starts over the last week or so, but he's still a phenomenal starting pitcher. And someone you are comfortable with having the ace, and someone you feel even better with when he has a solid number 2 behind him too. Yeah,
and as you get closer to the playoffs, you feel a lot better about Zach Eflin being in that playoff rotation, hopefully with Grayson Rodriguez as well. You mentioned it, I think, a week or so ago when we were talking about Grayson, but you're right, a very mature decision from him to say, hey, something doesn't feel right. Grayson Rodriguez is a competitor. And we know that, if that were a playoff game, he's probably pushing through, he's probably pitching. But to say, hey, something doesn't feel 100%, hopefully that pays dividends in the long run, and we're able to see him in late September and into October. But looks like we're going to see Zach Eflin this weekend, which is, that's big. Unfortunately, we do have bad injury news because, again, it would not be an episode of this show without bad injury news. And that is Ryan Mountcastle, who was out for a while with a wrist injury. He was kind of in a similar boat to Cedric Mullins, where he didn't need the injured list right away. You were just hoping that it was going to be a day-to-day sort of thing. He'd be back in the lineup soon. Brandon Hyde said that his wrist did not respond to treatment like the Orioles were hoping, and so he is on the 10-day injured list. It is retroactive to about a week ago when Mountcastle first started missing time. Hyde said that they are optimistic he won't miss much more than the 10 days, but it is certainly still a blow to the offense. And we're going to talk about the offensive woes here in general in just a few minutes, but Mountcastle, I know, hadn't been playing his best baseball in the second half, but this is still one of your best bats against left-handed pitching. It is still an important platoon piece with Ryan O'Hearn to ensure that, you're still putting O'Hearn in all of the best positions possible to succeed, not throwing him against too many left-handed starting pitchers. So Mountcastle, while it was starting to become a bit more of a rotation between Mountcastle, O'Hearn, and Jimenez, and Mountie hadn't been putting up the power numbers we were accustomed to seeing from him in the second half, this is still a big blow, especially against left-handed pitching.
Yeah, and it's definitely, this is someone that was in conversation right before the All-Star break to kind of be one of those All-Stars as well. So it is definitely, it hurts to see Mountcastle, huge leader in this clubhouse as well, to go down like that. Luckily, it is only just 10 days for right now. I will say it's kind of interesting timing. There's never good timing for an injury, but you do have, luckily, Ryan O'Hearn to be able to fill those shoes at first base, especially when you're going up against 3 right-handed pitchers in this Dodgers series, whereas if there were some lefty pitchers, you probably would be a little bit more upset that you didn't have Mountcastle there at first base. But you're right, he hasn't kind of been using all of his raw power that we know he has in the second half. His last home run was July 29th. His OPS since the break is 643, whereas it was 726 going into the All-Star break. So you are definitely seeing a slower Mountcastle comparatively from the first half to the second half, as well as just what we've seen from him in previous seasons. So it hurts. I wouldn't say it necessarily is like an end-all, be-all that you have Mountcastle on the injured list. Again, because it is only 10 days, and it's not necessarily like a necessarily completely impactful power bat that you're losing.
Yeah, absolutely. As of late, he has not been the powerful right-handed swing that we are accustomed to seeing from Ryan Mountcastle. We know over the past few years, with the left field wall getting pushed back, Ryan Mountcastle has been well documented as one of the players that adjustment has hurt the most in terms of his power numbers. But this is still a good offensive first baseman. As he mentioned, he was in the All-Star conversation in the first half of the season. And don't forget, too, this is a really solid defensive first baseman. Sure. He's in the 78th percentile in outs above average, according to StatCast. And the bat is still good. It's still a solid bat. 85th percentile expected batting average, 75th percentile expected slugging percentage, 72nd percentile expected WOBA. So this is still a quality bat. And while you're not going to freak out, like you said, this isn't a long-term injury, we don't think. We're hoping, and Brandon Hyde is hoping, that he will be back off the injured list just a few days after that 10-day injured list stint is up, and he'll be back in the lineup. And it's a good point, too, that with 3 right-handed starting pitchers in L.A., Mountie, isn't going to be towards the top of the lineup against a right-handed pitcher. He's probably going to be hitting 6th or 7th if he is in the lineup against a righty. So I guess if there is a series for Mountie to miss, it's one where you're facing 3 right-handed starting pitchers, but it doesn't kill you, but it still hurts.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of these injuries have just accumulated to the point where you're going, man, maybe individually they aren't the largest injuries in the world. Like, Jacob Webb. I think that's a solid comparison there where, individually it doesn't kill you, but when you add it on to the Danny Coulomb injury and to the Felix Bautista injury and to this and that, it just hurts a little bit more because it's these injuries compiling, and you just can't you can't seem to get the best 9 guys in the lineup for a roster construction day in and day out.
Yeah, totally. And you also knew at the trade deadline that the Orioles were kind of looking and needed some right-handed hitters. Yeah. But then you also didn't foresee what was going to happen with Jordan Westberg, Ryan Mountcastle, Jorge Mateo, 3 huge right-handed pieces to this Orioles lineup in the first half and for last season as well. So especially going against left-handed pitchers, you have kind of numbers all across the board, but Ryan Mountcastle was definitely a huge contributor to being consistent against left-handed pitchers and someone you knew you would want in that lineup. As of now, Austin Slater's been really great going, especially leading off against left-handed pitchers. Yep. Small sample size with the O's, but he's 7 for 25 against lefties right now. So definitely kind of a blow when you look at who they were trying to get at the trade deadline for right-handed hitters. You got Eloy Jimenez and some other guys, but knowing Mountcastle was one of those leading guys that you put in against a left-handed pitcher, it hurts. Yeah, the lineup construction against left-handed pitching is an issue right now, given the injuries. And let's get into the offense conversation here, because in August, the Orioles' offense has not been very good. 15th in runs scored. This is entering last night's game because I got sleepy and then I didn't update these stats. So entering last night's game against the Dodgers, 15th in runs scored, 21st in hits, 15th in home runs. These are all in the month of August. 22nd in batting average, 24th in on-base percentage, 19th in slugging percentage, and 20th in OPS at a 697. This is not a bad offense. We saw at the beginning of the year it was anything but. This is one of the most prolific offenses in baseball. They were averaging over 5 runs a game. The offense was humming. So this is not a conversation of the Orioles offense is broken and how do you fix it. This is a conversation of the Orioles offense has been struggling over the last month or two. Why? Because this is a talented offense with a lot of talented hitters, and we have seen that this can be one of the best offenses in all of baseball, and they're just not doing it right now. And one of the reasons why is the lineup construction against left-handed pitching. On the season, this is a pretty solid lineup against lefties, OPS-wise. But in August and really since the trade deadline, with injuries and with trades, this is a tough lineup construction against left-handed pitching. Mm-hmm. Because right now you are without Jordan Westberg and Ryan Mountcastle and Jorge Mateo due to injury. Jordan Westberg, whether it's against left-handed pitching or right-handed pitching, was just flat out one of your best hitters in this lineup. It was an all-star third baseman, 269, 317, 497 slash line, and 815 OPS.
he was also the best clutch hitter on the team.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the Orioles' struggles with runners in scoring position, but Jordan Westburg being out of this lineup, you take out somebody with an OPS over 1,000 in high leverage situations, which is 7th inning and beyond. The game is within a run or two. There's a specific situation for it, but bottom line is that in big moments, Jordan Westburg was your best hitter. Ryan Mountcastle hitting .290 with a 786 OPS against left-handed pitching. Jorge Mateo, 262 with a 799 OPS against left-handed pitching. And then you traded Austin Hayes at the deadline as well, who was mashing lefties. So that's 4 really important pieces of the lineup against lefties that you don't have. Austin Hayes, obviously, you're not going to have for the rest of the season, considering he's not on the team anymore. 3 injuries. Jorge Mateo's injury seems to be longer term. We have hopefully gotten some positive updates on Ryan Mountcastle here, where hopefully he'll be back after this 10-day stint is up. And Jordan Westburg, fingers crossed for September. But as of right now, that is a lot of important bats out of the lineup against lefties.
Yeah, and especially we had a whole episode about this last week, but it is important to remember that the Orioles are not the only team struggling in the second half.
Yeah.
The Phillies, who are tied for first right now in all of the big leagues, is just 16-20 since the break.
Yeah.
The Guardians are 17-21. The Orioles are 18-18. So, yes, they have had offensive struggles and not great stats compared to the rest of the league in the second half, or August at least. But they're not the only ones there, and you can watch that episode back from last week if you'd like. But
yeah.
So it is important to remember that. But yes, you are missing 3 key pieces to this offense, especially in Jordan Westburg, like you said, who was huge and someone you really trusted going up at the plate when you had runners in scoring position. So that's definitely a huge blow. And yes, it is kind of like a slow spurt right now for a lot of people on offense for the Orioles, but then there's also a handful who have been really like bright spots for this offense. The Ramon Reminder is coming.
Time for a Ramon Reminder, everybody. Here we are.
Ramon Arias, let's see. Home run last night, 3-run homer that kept the O's in it in Game 4 against the Astros. 855 OPS since the All-Star break, and above 1,000 OPS in the last 10 games. That's your Ramon Reminder.
This has been your Ramon Reminder, and we're going to do it every week
Every single week.
The amount of comments that we had to read and go through when Ramon Arias was not playing his best baseball at the beginning of the year, and there were calls to DFA Ramon Arias, to trade Ramon Arias, to just put Ramon Arias somewhere that was not this baseball team.
Wrong.
And we got up here and said, hey, you should keep Ramon Arias on this baseball team, because he is not a player that you just DFA for nothing, and he is giving you solid defense at third base, and he can, at least be a league average hitter, and he's been much better than that. Mm-hmm. And with Jordan Westburg's injury, I don't know where this team is without Ramon Arias right now. He has been fantastic in the second half of the season. He has been scorching hot in August, scorching hot in July. So this was your Ramon Reminder. We will be back next week with another one. It is trademarked. But yeah, this lineup against left-handed pitching right now, I think if everybody is healthy, you're probably looking at Jorge Mateo at second base, Jordan Westburg at third base, Ryan Mountcastle at first base, and then you add in Austin Slater in left field and Eloy Jimenez as your designated hitter, the 2 guys that you got at the deadline. It's a very different lineup construction than what the Orioles have right now, with no Mateo, with no Westburg, with no Mountcastle. You have to, Ramon Arias, as we just mentioned, has been solid at third base. So, yes, you don't have Westburg, but you're still very happy with the production that Ramon Arias has been giving you. Jackson Holliday is still trying to figure out the big leagues. He's still trying to figure out left-handed pitching for sure. And I think ideally, you don't want to just platoon Jackson Holliday. You want to get him reps against left-handed pitching. But I think as we enter September, as much as you want to see Jackson Holliday develop and get better, ideally, you would start Jorge Mateo at second base with Jackson Holliday getting some days off against left-handed pitching, because you're asking him to learn a new position, to learn the big leagues, and to hit left-handed pitching as a left-handed hitter. That's a tall task for somebody like Jackson Holliday, even as the best prospect in baseball.
Yeah.
And then with no Ryan Mountcastle at first base, you're asking Ryan O'Hearn to play first base. And Ryan O'Hearn has been so successful in an Orioles uniform. A, because he has made some quality swing changes. He has gotten in the building and the Orioles have helped him a lot. But B, because the Orioles are putting him in a lot of good positions, which is a lot of starts against right-handed pitching. And you're not throwing him against lefties because that's not his strength.
Yeah.
And so his numbers have looked fantastic because of the situations he's been in. But with no Mountcastle, you're seeing O'Hearn at first base against left-handed pitching. That's not where he thrives.
Yeah.
And O'Hearn has struggled a bit in the second half of the season, which brings me to kind of my second point of why the offense has been struggling a little bit. Your good players have just been slumping a little bit. And that's going to happen. Good players slump. Great players slump. It just happens in baseball. It's a long season. But a lot of your good players are just kind of slumping at the same time.
Yeah.
Which doesn't rock. But it's just what's happening.
Yeah, that's baseball.
Objectively does not rock.
Trademark that too.
Yes, I will.
Yeah, no, definitely. It has been an unfortunate time where they've all been slumping together. I mean, you're counting on three major pieces in Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Anthony Santander, who have been fantastic and are still fantastic contributors, but at the same time, they're kind of struggling right now, working through it. And when you take a step back and as a player in the clubhouse, to see so many other teammates get injured, it's got to be a big blow.
Yeah.
Not only to individual confidence, but especially team confidence, because you're going in it and you're constantly trying to maneuver all these missing pieces and changes in lineups and yes, like the batting order has been changed a number of times given kind of offensive struggles and slow spurts like we've been talking about. But some of them have worked, and that's a credit to Brandon Hyde as well to make those adjustments with Austin Slater leading off or Colton Cowser leading off instead of always Gunnar or Adley.
Yep.
So that has been a positive for being able to maneuver everything and all the missing and changing pieces. But at the same time, you take that step back and look at all the different players who have been on the injured list. That's a lot to handle, and especially when you're trying to stay hot or keep heating up, it's very hard to do that.
Yeah, Brandon Hyde has alluded to it before, but guys are just pressing. And I think that's a good point where if you're in the clubhouse and as much as you want to have that next man up mentality and as much confidence as the Orioles have in guys stepping up. I mean, we heard it from Ryan O'Hearn last night. He talked with Melanie Newman in his post-game press conference about Ramon Arias and how important he has been in Jordan Westberg's absence. Ryan O'Hearn was like, put some respect on the guy's name. Like, they have confidence in the guys in the clubhouse to be able to step up in other people's absence. But this is a young team with a lot of players that are either, stars already in Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson, are budding stars, guys like Colton Cowser. I think Anthony Santander, I know he's a bit older, but you could put him in that category with somebody, who's going to hit 40 home runs this year. You probably can't help but look at the injuries in the lineup and look at the fact that, there's not even just the lineup, the starting pitching has been well documented as being really hurt as well over the last few weeks and months, really. And so, yeah, it's natural to probably press a little bit where, you're Adley Rutschman or Gunnar Henderson and you feel like, okay, guys are kind of dropping left and right here, and there's injuries in the lineup, there's injuries in the starting rotation, there's injuries in the bullpen. The offense has got to step up. I've got to hit a home run. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And so we're not seeing the same kinds of at-bats that we're accustomed to from those guys because it's not the same lineup 1 through 9 where you feel like guys hitting 7, 8, 9 can turn the lineup over consistently and it doesn't have the same flow as it did at the beginning of the season. The starting rotation does not have the kind of names that it had at the beginning of the season. Not that those guys can't produce and not that the guys 7, 8, 9 in the lineup can't produce, but it doesn't have the same feel to it. And I think guys are probably just pressing and feeling like they have to carry the weight a little bit more. And Adley Rutschman, we'll, go through the specific numbers here. Adley Rutschman, a 482 OPS in July, a 691 OPS in August. He has been fighting through some injuries. We know he was hit in the hand. He's got the back injuries lingering. I'm not saying that's the reason that he's been slumping here, but probably something to keep in mind that Adley Rutschman
Yeah.
is more than likely fighting through some injuries. Gunnar Henderson, 751 OPS in July, 818 OPS in August. Those are still really good numbers, but we're used to seeing a 950 OPS from Gunnar Henderson at the beginning of the season. Colton Cowser and Anthony Santander both had an OPS over 900 in July. Cowser at 911, Santander at 987. Santander's at a 696 in August. Colton Cowser is at a 710. And then Ryan O'Hearn, a 625 OPS in August. He choked last night. He hadn't hit a home run in a while. Hit one against the Dodgers last night. Those are not bad players. Those are all really good baseball players. And there's not really anything you can do with those guys because you're not going to take them out of the lineup. You know, as I mentioned, you can put guys like Ryan O'Hearn in good positions where he's facing right-handed pitching. Same thing with Colton Cowser. I think Cowser's probably cemented himself as an everyday guy at this point, but Adley, Gunnar, Cowser, Santander, and O'Hearn, those are really good hitters, and you're not going to take them out of the lineup just because they're slumping. They need to get at bats. They need to work through it. It's just unfortunate that they are all slumping at the same time. And there's not really anything you can do about it because they're good players that are going to play. They just need to start hitting better. And they are unfortunately slumping at just the same point here.
Yeah, and even though Adley is one of those guys that are slumping, I mean, he's still hitting 342 against lefties, and that's the best on the team, so that's huge and someone you're definitely going to look for moving forward, regardless of if Ryan Mountcastle is in that lineup or not, and same with Jordan Westbrook, Jorge Mateo. But you also take a look at moving forward when in September you're getting 4 huge guys back in the batting order in Ryan Mountcastle expected back September 2nd, Jordan Westbrook expected back September 13th, Jorge Mateo September 24th, Heston Kjerstad tomorrow, but that's a concussion. We don't know. That's definitely subject to change. So, but those other 3 guys that we've said before that September is going to feel like a completely different team and a late trade deadline just for the Orioles, which is something that I also think and hope that these guys that are slumping already in the batting order right now and who have been healthy all season, knock on wood, will get excited about and be able to kind of get that energy back where they won't feel like they have to be pressing for a long stretch of time anymore. And then, I just think that that's an exciting time for not only just the people who are coming back, but also for those guys who have been trying to pull the rest of the weight in the lineup. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think Jordan Westberg of the guys in the lineup is the most important one. As I mentioned before, he is the best clutch hitter on this team. His OPS in high leverage situations with runners in scoring position is outstanding. And even in games that the Orioles are winning, you know, we saw last night, the Orioles won 3-2 in LA. They were still, I think, 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position and left 8 men on base. Jordan Westberg changes that.
Yeah.
There's not really something that you can look at that says this guy is better in clutch situations than others, and here's why. It's just, he's really good in those spots.
Yeah.
You don't know if it's a mental thing or if whatever it may be, Jordan Westberg is really good in those spots, and the Orioles have quality hitters that can deliver in those points, but there's something to be said for having somebody like Westberg that comes up with a runner on second, and you're like, man, Jordan Westberg's coming through here.
Yeah.
That's just what he does in the lineup, and it's an all-star caliber player. And it is somebody who Brandon Hyde has said, he's maybe the hardest worker on the team. He gets there before anybody else. He just lives and breathes baseball. Like, that's all the dude does, and that's all he cares about is just being good at baseball. You're missing a guy like that right now, and that really hurts in the lineup. It hurts against left-handed pitching because he was probably your best right-handed bat in the lineup. And it hurts in those clutch spots because he is the best one at that. So if there's one guy that it may be more important than anybody else to get back in late September and early October when you need big hits and clutch moments, Jordan Westberg is not a veteran, but he feels like one in the way that he plays. Yeah,
and it's not even just the numbers, it's just who he is as a person as well. You mentioned that work ethic. It was funny yesterday on the pregame show, Brandon Hyde was saying, like, I don't know. He's a different person now in terms of personality. He's
Yeah.
talking a lot more in the dugout. It's great to see this side of him. So it'll be fun to see him back, especially when he's healthy again, and you can tell he's just itching to play some ball again. It is an interesting time for Mountcastle to come back. It's just a day after roster expansions in September, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of roster moves are made, because with a set number of players able to come back from the injured list back onto the roster, I don't expect there to be some players that'll make a difference in a long spurt of time or stint from that expansion, given the time in September that a bunch of IL guys will come back. So that's another reason why it's kind of interesting timing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Orioles construct the roster. Once rosters expand in September, we're going to see hopefully Ryan Mountcastle and Jordan Westberg back at that point. I think we could see guys like Kobe Mayo and Heston Kjerstad down the stretch. You know, they could be September expanded roster type of guys. They would certainly help the offense as well. I know Kobe Mayo struggled in his first stint, but that happens when you're a rookie. We know what Heston Kjerstad can do with the bat. So those two guys getting back, Heston Kjerstad getting back from injury. You mentioned he's on the concussion list right now. Don't really know what that timeline looks like just because you don't mess with concussions. And then Kobe Mayo could be back at some point as well. So those two guys would certainly contribute to the offense. So we've talked about the offensive woes and the offensive struggles, but let's talk about how you fix it. And honestly, the answer is that, at least in my opinion, I don't think there's a ton you can do right now outside of giving it time. Because we have talked about the guys coming back from injury that are going to be important in this lineup. I think Brandon Hyde is pulling a lot of the right strings right now.
Yeah.
You mentioned Austin Slater, who has been fantastic out of the leadoff spot against left-handed pitching, much to the chagrin of Orioles Twitter that likes to make fun of Brandon Hyde whenever he puts Austin Slater at the top of the lineup against
Never
lefties.
does anything.
It works. and keep doing it, because every time that you give Brandon Hyde grief for batting Austin Slater leadoff, he's 2 for 4 with a double and a walk. So, keep doing it. That's fine. Colton Cowser moving to the leadoff spot against right-handed pitching. That was another great move from Brandon Hyde. Goes to Cowser in the leadoff spot in July. He was fantastic all month long. That was another great move. So I think Brandon Hyde is pulling the right strings in the lineup right now to try to get the most production that you can. As mentioned, you kind of just need to trust that your good players are going to turn things around. Adley, Gunnar, Cowser, Santander. Yes, they have struggled in August OPS-wise. You have to believe that those guys are going to be good down the stretch. If they're the reason that you lose baseball games in late September and early October, okay, you put faith in your good players at the top of the lineup that they are going to perform well. Right now, they are slumping a little bit. It's a long season, and it happens, but you have to put your faith in those guys, that they are going to be your highest producing hitters in the lineup down the stretch, because otherwise you're just not going to win baseball games if those guys aren't playing well, plain and simple. So there's not really much you can do for them. Sure, you can give them off days here and there, make sure they're staying fresh, whatever, but those guys just need to play well. And there's not much you can do lineup construction-wise to make a difference there, I don't think. Yeah,
and we'll see when it gets to the time where we are getting some huge contributors back from the injured list, what those lineups will look like. I mean, I'm sure it'll be very similar to what it was before we lost all those guys to injuries. So I think that also not only just faith in the good players, but also faith in Brandon Hyde. I mean, especially when it comes to pinch hitting, he's made some great calls. I know he's gotten a lot of flack.
They're the best team in baseball in pinch hitting. Yeah.
I mean, you look back to Jackson Holliday getting brought in at a bases loaded moment as a pinch hitter, and then hits a 3-run double. So that was a risk, he said, but it was a good call after all. And I think you do have to be able to put more faith into Brandon Hyde. I mean, he was the manager of the year. That doesn't go unnoticed. And then also how well it's worked when he's reconstructing who's leading off and who's going to pinch hit. I mean, Austin Slater has pinch hit well in the past. Jackson Holliday, another prime example. So not only look forward to and get excited, and not only just fans-wise, but I think those top players like Adley, Gunnar, Santander will be very excited to get players like Westberg Mountie back in the lineup, Jorge Mateo, but also be excited and have some faith in Brandon Hyde decisions. And I'm not just saying that because it's Brandon Hyde, but the proof is in the pudding. Like, they are the best pinch hitting team in baseball.
Yeah, they are quite literally the best. And it's not even particularly close. I think Orioles pinch hitters are hitting about 350 this year. I don't think there's another team over 300. Yeah. So it's really not close. You've also got to hit some dingers, which is a nice fix. Friend of the program, Paul Mancano, tweeted out a stat the other day that the Orioles are just not winning many baseball games when they go a stretch without either hitting a homer in a game or if they hit one homer in a game. They don't win a lot of those games because the way the Orioles are currently constructed, 1 through 9 can hit home runs in this lineup, and that's great. It's not as great when the lineup is constructed with guys that, aren't taking a ton of walks. We talked about that at the beginning of the season where the approach was so aggressive and they were hitting so many home runs. They were hitting the most home runs in baseball, but they weren't walking a ton.
Yeah.
So this is how the lineup is just going to be. They are 15th in baseball in home runs in August with 28th as of last night. They hit 2 last night with Ryan O'Hearn and Ramon Urias, and that's why they won the baseball game because they scored 3 runs, and it was O'Hearn and Urias with long balls. They aren't hitting great with runners in scoring position right now because their player who's the best at that, Jordan Westberg, is out of the lineup. And they just flat out haven't really been doing that well this season in general. So you need the power hitters to hit more home runs.
Yeah.
I know Anthony Santander is more than carrying his weight, but Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Colton Cowser, their power numbers have taken a bit of a downturn in August and July. And again, those are good players that are going to hit more home runs. They've just got to do it because that's how the Orioles are constructed to win games right now. They were scoring over 5 runs a game at the beginning of the season when they led baseball in home runs. When you're middle of the pack in home runs,
it's a different story.
The way the team is built right now, you're just not going to win as many games if you're not hitting homers. And then the final point, as we've mentioned, is just you got to get healthy. Not only the lineup, but the starting rotation as well. This team feels different with Zach Eflin and Grayson Rodriguez in the starting rotation, and I'm sure it feels different in the clubhouse when you have Grayson Rodriguez, who at the time of his injury was close to the top of the American League leaderboards in wins. Pitcher wins are not a stat that I pay attention to all that much, but clearly the Orioles win a lot of baseball games when Grayson Rodriguez is on the mound, and I'm sure that has an impact in the lineup. Zach Eflin is the same way. He has given you fantastic outings in his time in Baltimore. And if you're in the lineup, you don't have to press as much when you know that Zach Eflin is on the mound. You want to get him run support, but hey, you might not need more than 3 runs of run support if Zach Eflin is on the mound. So maybe you can play a little more small ball. Maybe you're not trying to hit 7-run home runs every time you're up to bat. You don't have to press as much when the starting rotation is healthy, when the lineup is completely healthy and there are guys below you that you know can help contribute as well. You don't need to play hero ball all the time if it is a healthy team down the stretch.
Yeah, 100%. And not to mention Albert Suarez, too. He's been playing incredibly, especially when he's had to come in on short notice with the Grayson Rodriguez injury or kind of just step in as that trustworthy starter that he's been as of late. I mean, I think he has the best ERA out of the Orioles pitchers right now, probably next to Corbin Burns.
Yeah.
But so that's someone that you can trust regardless of when you get Zach Eflin, Grayson Rodriguez back, but to have that 3 and then someone who, if when you get to playoffs, you could see Albert Suarez be a high leverage reliever, which could be great, and he's succeeded at that in the past as well. So yes, getting healthy, putting faith into some players, that's kind of the name of the game right now. September is going to be a really exciting time, kind of a whole shift in the lineup and team.
Yeah.
So it'll be a lot of fun to see what they're like.
Yeah, honestly, I know we spent this show talking about what the struggles have been in the offense, but truthfully, the solution is just trust that your good players are going to be good down the stretch. I know they are kind of all slumping simultaneously right now, which is unfortunate, but in late September and early October, you just hope they get hot, and you hope that, Adley Rutschman heating up is going to help Gunnar Henderson heat up, which is going to help Colton Cowser heat up, which is, it's just going to have a trickle-down effect once you have the players at the top of the lineup hitting well, we saw it in July, where this offense was kind of carried by Colton Cowser and Anthony Santander, and it didn't necessarily get everybody else going, but you were still winning baseball games because Cowser and Santander at the top of the lineup were coming through for you in big moments, and you have to have some faith that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because there's not much you can do lineup construction-wise. As I mentioned, you're not going to take Adley out of the lineup very often. You're not going to take Gunnar out of the lineup very often. Your good players, you've got to believe, are just going to play well down the stretch. So there's not really an answer outside of just baseball is a streaky game, and you hope that your good players get hot at the right time, and it coincides with guys getting healthy, and then you're just a full sprint towards the finish line in October. That's kind of the only solution right now. I think Brandon Hyde is making a lot of good decisions lineup construction-wise, and sure, you can go through the individual nuances of every player and say, hey, this guy needs to hit breaking balls better, or this guy needs to do better in this count, but the good players just need to play well, and they will, because this team is good enough to do it. We saw it at the beginning of the year where they were putting up a ton of runs. The talent is there. There are plenty of guys on this team that can produce. You just have to have some faith that they're gonna down the stretch.
Yeah, and we've known that this is a home run reliant team for the whole year, and that's been how they are since the beginning of the season. So it's going to come down to, can they score runs in other ways? And when they get Adley to be back in his top shape and Gunnar back into and Adley being healthy completely too, not only just fighting through some back pains and what have you, but also Gunnar and Santander kind of scoring in other ways, and once you get Jordan Westberg back. So it'll definitely be a shift in September when you get those players back, but it also need to come down to how they can score, either get back to how it was, still being home run heavy in the beginning of the season, or in June with Santander and his stellar June and July, or moving forward, are they coming up with different ways to score?
Yeah, I think you can be home run heavy without being home run reliant.
Sure.
I think that's the difference. When you have guys right now that, as we mentioned and Brandon Hyde has mentioned, are pressing, I think that's when you become home run reliant, where you're just taking huge hacks every time up. You're trying to get your doubles power to translate into home run power every time you're at the plate. You don't need to do that when you're stringing hits together. And once we hit September and October and the weather cools down and the ball's not flying as far, you can't be home run reliant in the playoffs. That's not how teams win in October. You win with clutch hit. And sure, you can still be home run heavy. You can still have the home run ball lead the way for you in September and October. But if you are living and dying by the home run ball, then that's not going to work down the stretch. And I think once this lineup starts to heat up a little bit, and the ball's not flying as far, and you see some more singles and doubles and guys not pressing as hard as they have been, that's when this offense is going to get rolling. If you're hitting with runners in scoring position, if it's just opportune hitting rather than swinging for the fences all the time, the offense will turn around. They have the talent to do it, and you've just got to have faith that they're going to get hot at the right time down the stretch.
And they're still at the top of the stand.
They're still a game back of the AL East. As you mentioned, other top teams around baseball are struggling. Like, if you want to talk about what the Orioles are doing in August, they've got a 697 team OPS right now. The Guardians have a 660 team OPS and
Guardians
just lost
struggling.
the division lead because here come the Royals, who are now tied atop the AL Central. So if you want to be in panic mode about the Orioles, they're still a game back of the division. They are still right there with the best record in the American League. And a team like the Guardians just lost the division lead. So they had, I think, as big of a lead as 9 or 10 games. So the Orioles didn't have that. I know you can panic a little bit if you want to in July and August. Wouldn't recommend it, but there are other teams around baseball that are doing this. And hopefully the Orioles offense will pick things up. Hopefully they'll get healthy. Hopefully next week on the Bird's Nest, we won't have a single negative injury update for you. I don't know. We've been going weeks saying that. I don't know if it's going to happen, but we can only hope. But that'll just about do it for this week's edition of the Bird's Nest. Thank you so much for following along with us live. on Facebook and YouTube an hour early this week, but we will usually be coming to you live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. on YouTube and Facebook, or you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts or your digital shows. You can find us here on the Bird's Nest. Big thank you to Bobby Blanco behind the scenes for producing this one. For Andy Claff, I am Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.